Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Microsoft 365 Backup with a Remote Workforce. Today's special webinar event is brought to you in partnership with Druva and produced by Actual Tech Media. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We've got a great event lined up for you today. We've got hundreds of folks joining us from around the world and across the United States. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join today's webinar to learn about protecting your Microsoft 365 Office suite and data. It's a critical topic, and too many companies out there just aren't doing enough around this type of data protection. So hot topic for today's event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll serve as your moderator on today's webinar. We want you to know we want this to be educational, so we encourage questions. It's over there on the left-hand side of your audience console. I can call your attention to it now. Make sure that you enter your questions throughout the event, and we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. We also have in the handouts tab there a link to the Druva website where you can find out more information about the Druva solution at any time. So make sure that you check that out. And then finally, we'll be announcing the winner of today's Amazon $300 gift card at the end of today's webinar. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms can be found in the handouts tab. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenter. That is Mr. W. Curtis Preston, Chief Technology Evangelist at Druva. Curtis, thank you so much for being on the event today.
Happy to be here. Greetings to everybody. I see a bunch of you over there logged in. And greetings to you from not so sunny right now, Southern California. Yeah, it's been a very, smoky time to be in Southern California. So we're going to talk about backing up Microsoft 365 and by the way, if you missed that rebranding event, Office 365 is now called Microsoft 365. That was a change that Microsoft made not that long ago. So occasionally I will accidentally slip up and refer to it as the old name. So let's just start with the factors that are driving this vulnerability. And an interesting stat here that says that 58% of sensitive data in the cloud is actually in Microsoft Office documents, which I think speaks to simply how popular Microsoft 365 is. And there's another interesting stat here from Gartner saying that 70% of the business disruption due to unrecoverable SaaS data loss. That's a really interesting stat, because one of the things that we're told when we're talking to people about protecting their Microsoft 365 or their G Suite or whichever SaaS application that we're talking about is, does this really happen, right? Are companies losing data? Isn't this data protected for me? We'll talk about that. And the answer clearly is not. The other thing, obviously we know that ransomware is huge. Literally, I don't know, a week doesn't go by without some sort of ransomware attack, some sort of announcement that you see. And as a backup person, the part that just kills me is when I hear that people, that a company paid the ransom. And then there is this issue of litigation, right? $11 billion a year spent globally on eDiscovery. I live in America. We are the most litigious society on the planet, so I'm willing to bet that 10 of those 11 billion were probably in the U.S., but that's just a guess. And then compliance, right? The amount of data that people are spending on compliance to comply with things like GDPR, CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act, which is sort of like GDPR, but takes it a step further in a few areas. So here are some of the headlines of various ransomware victims that thought they were okay, and it turned out that they weren't. Some of these are about people that they had data stored on their laptops, and then their ransomware attacked the laptop, and then the ransomware then creeped into Microsoft 365 via the synchronization process. But the one I really want to focus on here is the one from the article from the Register that talked about KPMG, which is a huge company that had at least 145,000 users in Microsoft 365. So this is a company that clearly, I'm going to assume that they have somebody that's administering Microsoft 365 that knows what they're doing. And they were using retention policies. Well, just the mere fact that they were using retention policies suggests that they're on top of things, because that's a somewhat newer feature. It's a couple of years old at this point, but it's newer than the rest. And a lot of people still don't use this feature. And so they had this retention policy set so that they were backing up they were retaining all private chats from all users. And then for whatever reason, and the story doesn't go into this, they decided that one user needed to have their private chats deleted. And the retention policy said otherwise. And that is the whole point of a retention policy. And so the idea was that you can't, if you have, if you say a retention policy, if you have one that says all, emails, files, whatever, in this case, private chats, all private chats will be kept for, say, 3 years. You can't go into a particular user and then delete their private chats. They will still be retained. And so for whatever reason, they felt the need to go around that. And so the proper way to do that is to create another retention policy with the retention that you want, in this case, nothing, and then transfer the user into that retention policy. That then becomes retroactive, and then it will actually delete at that moment. If you specify this user's retention is now 0, it will then delete any retained versions that the previous policy had retained. The problem here was that they instead, I can't imagine. Well, actually, I've looked at the user interface, and I actually kind of know it's one of these things where that button was right next to this button, and they pushed that button instead of this button. And so instead of moving the one user into this new retention policy, they moved all of their users into that retention policy, and they suddenly, immediately, and forcibly deleted all private chat history for all 144,000 users. And they, of course, reached out to Microsoft, and Microsoft said, yeah, no, we don't have a backup of that, which, of course, is the point that we've continually tried to make. And they lost the chat history of 145,000 users. And, I wrote a blog about this that pretty sure we just published on Druva.com. So there's a little bit more details on that blog. But in my opinion, this one event, and I knew something like this was going to happen. There's been an event like this in G Suite. There's been a major event like this, like G Suite. There's been an event like this in G Drive. There's been an event like this in AWS, where a company felt they didn't need to back it up, and then they basically lost everything. There are 2 incidences of companies losing their entire, essentially the existence of their company, and or all of their company's intellectual property like that, because they were not backing up their cloud resources. And that just kills me. And then right now we're in the middle of COVID-19. And I'm sitting here at my, I feel like, I'm somewhat imprisoned in my own home, right? I'm sitting here at at a computer, and it's the computer that I spend most of my day at. In addition to my day job, I'm actually currently writing my next book. So for those of you that don't know, I've written 3 books for O'Reilly on backup and storage, and I'm currently writing the 4th one, which the current working title is Modern Data Protection. And so I'm working around the clock and at this laptop, and so I literally feel like I'm sitting at this chair all day long. So I feel you, and so are all your, the people that work at your company. They're working from home, and they're now using laptops that previously might have been inside the data center, and so they were protected from various things just by virtue of being in the data center. All of that is gone, right? They're now sitting at homes behind consumer grade routers with varying levels of protection, and now they're creating corporate data on those laptops that is nowhere near, and so there's data loss incidents, there's been security incidents, there's been obviously an increased, there's a lot of phishing going on, and so people are using the uncertainty of what's going on in order to attack people, and so COVID-19 is not helping. So I think if you are a Microsoft 365 customer, there's a number of things that you need to address, right? So you obviously want to make sure that the data continues to be available, and you want to make sure that it's secure. And Microsoft's position is that it is your responsibility to protect your data. If you don't agree with me or you don't believe me, go look in your service agreement, right? You will not find anything in your service agreement talking about backup and recovery. Microsoft and Google and Salesforce, they are under no legal obligation to protect your data in the way that you would think of when you think of from a backup and recovery perspective. That is your responsibility. The fact that you're now using Microsoft 365 to deliver your email services doesn't remove that responsibility. Then the other thing is about eDiscovery and complying with privacy regulations, right? There is some functionality built into Microsoft 365 to provide some of that, and so then we'll just talk about the difference between what they provide and what we provide. So these are various quotes from Microsoft documentation that talks about one of the big things that's simply not available within Microsoft 365 is point-in-time restore of a mailbox. So if you do have a mailbox that gets corrupted through ransomware or a malicious action or whatever, there really isn't anything built into Microsoft 365 to do a point-in-time restore of that mailbox. It's just not there. Yes, you can, if you're using retention policies and you didn't get a catastrophic event, you could put all of the email back, but it will be in a giant mumbo jumbo. You won't know, what was if you had any folders, those are all gone. What you can't do is you can say, put all the email back that was received in the last 30 days. What you can't do is say, put all the email back that was there yesterday. So if the user has some emails that he received, a year ago and then deleted, but he has some other emails that he received a year ago and then he kept. You can't put those back. The only way to put back emails from a year ago is to say, okay, put all emails in the inbox that were received in the last year. And now what he's going to get in the inbox is all of the emails that he received in the last year in his inbox. Just think about that. So that's what I mean when there's no point-in-time restore. There's a bunch of other things here. Versioning is what's built into SharePoint and OneDrive, and versioning is not backup. And Microsoft makes that clear in their documentation. So there are a number of things that are not backup, right? Retention, I've talked about that. And again, I think that event that happened at KPMG illustrates that more than anything. Retention is not backup. OneDrive is not backup, right? Using it as a way to back up things. OneDrive is something to back up, not something to use as a backup. Versioning, I've already talked about that. And recycle bins, definitely recycle bins, not backup. The 3-2-1 rule matters. Now, any of you that have listened to my podcast know that I talk about the 3-2-1 rule a lot because it's really, it's basically the basic rule. It's the E=mc² of backup. All backup design is based on the idea of the 3-2-1 rule in one degree or another. The 3-2-1 rule says that you want to have at least 3 versions of your data on 2 different media, one of which is somewhere else. And all of this makes perfect sense, right? You don't want to back up your computer to your computer, and you don't want to store your backups right next to your computer. That's all that really says. And the 3 versions, obviously, most people have a lot more than that. That's not usually the problem. The problem here, when we talk about Microsoft 365, and again, this isn't an anti-Microsoft thing. It's not an anti-SaaS thing. We're SaaS. We love SaaS. It's just that there isn't anything built into Microsoft 365 that provides the 2 or the 1, meaning you are not backing up whatever Microsoft 365 is doing. That thing, whatever it is, retention, recycle bins, whatever, it's being stored in the same exact system that you're trying to protect. So it doesn't follow the 2. And then there's definitely not the 1. The backup is not stored in another location, right? And so if you do have some sort of catastrophic event that takes out your account, like what happened with KPMG, there is literally no recourse because it's all in the same place. These are quotes from some of our various customers that are using Druva to solve various problems in Office 365. Again, there I slipped up, said the old name, Microsoft 365. And we have quite a bit. In fact, I think one of our biggest areas of growth at Druva has been Microsoft 365 customers. It's a combination of people are waking up to the reality that they need to protect Microsoft 365 and also that it's very popular itself. So let's talk about some of these challenges. I talked about this already, that basically, the thing that you're, from a data availability perspective, the big thing you're trying to protect from is both deletion and corruption. Corruption could come both from a just something that can happen from a physiological standpoint to the data. When you think of corruption, you immediately think about maybe ransomware. I'm not talking necessarily corruption in that degree, but corruption could be like fat fingering a file, right? You're typing in some data and you just screw up a file. And then ransomware. I almost should put ransomware first at this point. You are most likely to delete or corrupt your own files, but you're also at this point very likely to have a ransomware attack. The number of companies or governmental entities that are experiencing ransomware attacks at this point are, it's too many to count. And so you really need to protect against that. And then I've talked about eDiscovery and compliance already, but so we do this for Microsoft 365. We do it for Salesforce, G Suite, Slack, and also mobile devices. So let's talk about Druva for Microsoft 365. So we protect, and by the way, one important thing is there are a number of companies that advertise that they support Microsoft 365. Many of them, the only thing they support is Microsoft Exchange Online. They do not yet support SharePoint, OneDrive, or Teams. Teams, for those of you that aren't familiar with Teams, Teams is essentially the Microsoft version of Slack, right? It works very much like Slack, but it's within the Microsoft world. And so when you're creating a group within Microsoft, you can create that group based on already defined groups in Exchange Online. Anyway, SharePoint Online and OneDrive are very much tied at the hip. And I've recently found out that actually Teams is somewhat tied to Microsoft Exchange Online a little bit more than I realized. With our protection for Microsoft 365, you get a consistent experience across all of those apps, right? So you can configure and automate policies, and you've got granular restore, so you can restore an entire user or just a few emails, or you can search against those emails. We talked about eDiscovery. And then also you can look for data. We'll talk about that to make sure that your data is staying compliant. There's also, we offer, if you're doing long-term storage, we offer reduction and pricing. And there's also, we do throttling with Microsoft 365 to make sure that things don't mess up your performance there. So I'll just talk about restore here for a minute, right? So the restore is, it can either be self-service or IT-led, right? Any point in time. So the thing that Microsoft 365 does, obviously we do. So you can do a point in time restore of any part. You can do some files or all the files, You can also restore it in place, or you can put it to an alternate device. You can actually restore the files that were in Microsoft 365 and download them to the laptop. And again, this can be driven by the user or by the administrators. And in all of the various reasons that you might want to do restore, one of which is ransomware. So the worst thing that can happen to you is a ransomware attack that attacks multiple users, and you can restore those multiple users with a pretty, a few mouse clicks, and then boom, they're restored. So let's talk about ransomware. Microsoft actually does a pretty good job at protecting you against ransomware, and they have, they have some advanced technologies that you can apply that can assist with ransomware, but you either pay for them separately, pay for them extra, either separately, or you get them in the E5 version, which is like $15 more per user. The thing here is that no matter what you do, and again, I'm not being anti-Microsoft 365 here, no matter what you do with whatever piece of technology you're talking about, there's always the risk that you could be attacked. And so the risk of you getting ransomware because you have Microsoft 365 is not nil. In fact, some of the articles that I mentioned back in the first, the page where I had all the articles, it talks about the fact that Microsoft 365 is very much a target. And it's not so much, remember, they're not going to attack necessarily Microsoft 365 itself as a platform. They're going to attack your users. They're going to phish your users. They're going to get privileged information and then use that information to get in and do bad things. So one of the ways that we can help is that we're seeing all of your data, whether we're backing up Microsoft 365 or your laptops or both. We can watch for patterns. We use machine learning to look for patterns. And when suddenly we see a very different pattern, the system notices. And what you're seeing here is that a user's the number of files that got backed up via a different user suddenly shot up to 10x of what they used to back up. And so we notify the administrator, we shut off the backups to that user. You can then very easily remediate that user. The quickest way, if we're talking about laptops, is to wipe the laptop, do a fresh OS install, and then restore the users. And I'm not aware, well, I was going to wax philosophical there for a minute. I'm not going to do that. All right, so eDiscovery. So this is something that Microsoft has, and I have used their eDiscovery tool. This is, by the way, when you use Microsoft retention policies, this is where the data gets stored. It doesn't get stored in a backup. It gets stored in eDiscovery, and then you need to do eDiscovery. You need to use the eDiscovery tool to quote unquote restore. eDiscovery tools are not made to restore. eDiscovery tools are made to find, show me all the emails with the word, umpty squat in them. That's not the way a restore works. There's nothing built into this tool that says do a point in time restore. And I've used the Microsoft 365 eDiscovery tool, and short version, it's just really slow and complicated. And whereas ours is very quick and very easy. So, if you were doing nothing other than this tool, it can save you money and save you time and effort if and when you get an eDiscovery request. You also, in addition to everything else, it can preserve departing employees' data, right? You can also, we have an automatic interface to online eDiscovery tools. And it's just a straight connection rather than what happens in Microsoft 365 where you have to download it and then upload it. So with ours, you determine what it is you want a particular eDiscovery account to to access, and then there's a direct connection between the two that is pretty seamless. So proactive compliance. So you can there are some rules in here that are out of the box, but you can also customize the rules. So an example of a rule here might be, number dash number dash number. I think I got that right. That's what a social security number looks like. There's a rule that says look for things that look like social security numbers, and because they should not be in your files. They should not be stored in files in Microsoft 365. You can automatically look for that, for patterns like that, and then notify the appropriate person so that that data can then be deleted off wherever it came from, and it can be deleted out of backups. You can also, do this retroactively. So you can, let's say you never heard of a social security number, and you come up with some new number, some new alphanumeric sequence that you can search on. You can search on that in the tool and either perform eDiscovery against it, or in this case, from a compliance perspective, you can actually proactively delete that data out of both your primary and your backup. And you can centrally manage this across workloads. So whatever you're using us for, it's not that uncommon for a customer to be protecting Microsoft 365 and their Salesforce account and their laptops, and you get compliance against across all of those. Speaking of which, there's also Federated Search across all of those workloads as well, and across multiple users, multiple workloads, which again, something not possible in Microsoft 365. So if you're thinking about protecting multiple workloads, we're the only way that you can. We are literally the only solution on the planet, as far as I know, that backs up both Microsoft 365 and laptops. So if you're interested in that, we're the only solution that can restore that you can do a federated search across those particular workloads. Preserved users is another thing that happens after an employee leaves the company. There's a way to do it in Microsoft 365. It costs money. At ours, it's included as part of the license. If you protected that user, you can then just put them as a preserved user, and they don't take up an active license after that. So just looking at the difference in terms of the way we do things, there are other solutions that protect Microsoft 365. We prefer to do it in a way where the data, there are no backup servers for you to have access to, right? So other solutions, there are backup servers, right? This is the way backup software has always been done. You have a backup server. You administered that backup server, and that backup server is a target for backup and recovery. I'm sorry, for backup and recovery. Of course, it's a target for backups. It's a target for ransomware or phishing attacks, or anything like that. So, for example, there are ransomware flavors out there that specifically look for the backup directory, or /backups or /backup, and they look for it and they attack that data, and that's because literally, this is going to sound like an obvious statement, but it's attackable because it exists, right? You have a backup server in your data center, or perhaps you have it as a VM in the cloud. But in order for that backup server to do its job, you have to make it appear essentially like it's in your data center. So it's still attackable via the same attacks that would attack your, anything else in your data center. So we don't have that. There is no backup server for you to be able to SSH into, or to use RDP to get to either well. You also control the key. We are a backup service. And we do not control the key. There's no ability for us to be able to get into your data. We use industry standard, what's called envelope encryption, which basically uses your username and password to create a token, which creates a token, and so on and so forth. And it's a one-way process. And then also we're using immutable and encrypted data storage. So everything is encrypted in transit, and then it's encrypted and stored again in, we happen to run our infrastructure in AWS, which means that we store our backups in S3. and all of them are immutable. There's no way to get access to them. S3 is automatically monitored for any sort of corruption or attack. And it's isolated from your network. This is sort of what I was alluding to before, where pretty much almost all of the other backup solutions, it's a backup server that's either in your data center or made to look like it's in your data center. And that backup data is reachable from your network. Our backup data is not. So it's just built in the ability to protect you from ransomware. So going back to that 3-2-1 rule. So we are both the 2 and the 1 automatically, right? So with ours is like the 3-3-1, right? So all backups are automatically stored in at least 3 locations, and obviously all of them are offsite. There's multi-factor authentication. There's VPNs if you need that. That's a quick overview of the Druva architecture. We have a ridiculous number of certifications and security standards that we follow. Again, as I mentioned, AWS, also Druva and AWS don't have any access to your data. We are GovCloud and FedRAMP authorized as well, for those of you that fall into that category. It's just a super simple thing, right? So basically there's nothing to install, right? You just need a Druva account. You go into that account, you authenticate your Microsoft 365 account with our service, and then you specify whether you want to do all users or select users, and then just magic happens after that. The other thing is, this is one of the beautiful things of SaaS. Those of you that have grown to use Microsoft 365, you know that they continually update their functionality, and magic just happens and you get new features. That's the same way it is with us. Again, that's different than the way typical backup software works, right? And we do that. We actually release new features. We use the Agile process, and we release new features a couple times a month. And the other thing is it scales on demand. And let me just tell a quick story about that gives that a great example. We had a customer that was backing up, I think it was like 10 or 15,000 laptops, which is, a nice size environment. They were a big pharmaceutical company. And they came to us and they said, listen, our CEO has read, one too many articles on ransomware, and we'd like to protect all the things, right? We'd like to protect all the laptops. And we're like, well, how many is that? And they're like 120,000. Well, the only thing we had to do was help them roll out software to 100,000 laptops. The back end automatically scaled to meet their needs. And it scales, by the way, both up and down throughout the day, right? So, obviously we have a burst of backups at certain times of the day. When that happens, the system automatically scales up. And then when it's not happening, it scales down. There's also no storage for you to provision and manage. And the storage, since we're using object storage, your usage automatically scales up and scales down as you, add data and add users. We also integrate with a number of tools like Okta for authentication and Splunk for security information. A number of tools that we continue to add. We continue to add this list, such as Xterra for eDiscovery. So just a couple of case studies. Integrion uses us to protect Microsoft 365, and they managed to reduce OpEx by 20%, so toward 25%, and also a 25% reduction in labor costs. And then Workforce, which is a company that you're probably familiar with, they also employed Microsoft 365 data protection with Druva, and they use it as a centralized platform to protect that. They've purchased our full suite, so they're doing Microsoft 365 endpoints and the data center, right? So we also protect data centers. And the cloud. We also protect cloud workloads, but in this case, they're using Microsoft 365 endpoints and the data center. So if you're interested in learning more about this, we have this event called Tuesday Live, where we do weekly live demos, and they are live, real live, and you can ask questions and you can help determine what actually is being demoed in that particular demo. And then also the solution is available in the AWS marketplace if that is one of the ways that you buy things. And you are the first group outside of Druva. We're announcing something today, and that is that we're doing our first Cloud Data Protection Summit, November 17th. It will be online, Druva DXP, and it will be a half-day virtual event for IT professionals, technologists, and developers to stay on top of the latest trends. It is free, if you're interested in that, go to dxp.druva.com to register for the event, and we'll make sure that you are on all the emails to make sure that you know that event is coming. But that's coming in 2 months from now on November 17th. And I want to thank everybody for attending, and I'll turn things back over to David.
Great presentation, Curtis, as always. We got lots of great questions here coming in from the audience. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. While we do some Q&A, I'm just going to bring up this poll question for everyone out there on your screen. I want to call your attention to the slides window. It says, what additional information would you like about the Druva solution? And this is a multi-select question there, so feel free to select more than one option. And with that, let's kick off some Q&A here. Curtis, we have got a lot of questions for you there in the questions folder. I'll do my best to kind of, look through these, but feel free to interject or jump in. You see one that catches your eye. There were a couple questions about the name of the book that you're writing, or the book you mentioned.
Oh, well, do I have to talk about my book? Yeah. So the working title is Modern Data Protection. It will be O'Reilly. None of my previous books have made it to print with the working title intact. So that is my current working title. But essentially, what it is it's about it's a 10,000 foot view of all of the things that you would need to back up, all of the things that you could back them up to, and then all of the things that you could back them up with, right? So it's sort of it's a sweeping coverage of, and also we cover disaster recovery. We cover, the budgets and how to get money for backups and things like that. So, but the current working title is Modern Data Protection.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds like that could help a lot of people. Next question they're asking about, might as well get this one out of the way. What's the licensing model for this solution?
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't mention that. We follow sort of the industry standard in this particular spot, which is people prefer to license these by the user. The data center we license by the terabyte, by the used terabyte, the number of terabytes we're storing on your behalf each month. But with this one, it is the number of users that you are protecting.
Nice. Okay. Someone else wants a signed copy of your book. Probably a little too soon for that.
A little too soon. By the way, I will say this: if they want to be a tech reviewer, just reach out to me. I can be reached at wcurtispreston@gmail.com, and they can, if they want to be a tech reviewer, if they're that interested and they want to be a tech reviewer, I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. Next question here. There's a couple of questions actually that are kind of along the same line, and that is, how does this stack up to the competitors or the other solutions that might be similar in this space? What makes this unique, really?
I was going to say, what do you expect me to say? It's so much better. No, so I would say there's two things. One is, I spent a lot of time talking about that we are that we do not run in the data center. We do not run on a backup server. Most of our competitors, that's what they do. And we see that as a huge differentiator, that that not only do you not have that backup server that is a risk, right? Any backup software, the best backup software and the best operating system is still sitting in your data center and is an attack risk. So we see that, we see what we do as very different from that. There are some other competitors that do, similar to what we do, where they back up the they back up Microsoft 365 to a SaaS service. And I would just say, when comparing to, when you're doing a direct comparison, I would just say, look at the totality of the offering, right? I'm not going to bash competitors. It's not my style, but just look at the totality offering. Some of the competitors that are direct in terms of SaaS competitors, some of them only do Exchange Online. Some of them do all the services, but they don't yet have eDiscovery services. And some of them don't. Like, if you're interested in a cross solution, we are the only one that does Microsoft 365 and G Suite and laptops and the data center as a single service. There's no other competitors that do that. So if that's what you're interested in, then we're the only game in town. We have competitors in each of those spaces, just like we have competitors and direct competitors in the Microsoft 365 space. But just look at the totality of the offering, I would say.
Got it. Okay, good advice. Next question here I see is about basically what else. I mean, we're talking here about Microsoft 365 backup specifically, but they're asking, what about backing up the local device? And also, what about backing up applications and data that are in our data center? Does Druva cover all of those?
Yes. So we back up Windows and Mac OS laptops. We also do mobile devices, so iOS and Android. And in the data center, we do Windows and Linux servers, as well as VMware and Hyper-V. And we directly support SQL Server and Oracle as workloads, but we have workarounds to support many others. And the way, if we're talking about a physical device, all of that works with what we call source side deduplication. So it's incremental, block level incremental forever, using source side dedupe to reduce both the amount of data that's sent from the device as well as the amount of data that's stored in the cloud, which is what we charge you for. We do global deduplication across your entire environment. So if you've got multiple laptops, multiple sites, and you back up all of that data centrally to a single, we run in almost all the AWS regions. By the way, that's another thing. When you look at some of our competitors, they only run in 1 or 2 regions. And some of our competitors, by the way, don't run in AWS. They run in Azure. If you want your infrastructure to run in Azure and you feel strongly on that, then sadly we are not the company for you. We believe strongly in basically putting our focus on doing the best that we can in AWS. And we made a decision that putting our infrastructure in both AWS and Azure or some other provider, that it would, because we're so cloud native, we're programming directly to what happens in AWS, right? We use DynamoDB, for example, as a key value database for our deduplication and our metadata store. And there wasn't, when we looked at Azure, there wasn't a correlation for that. And so because we're programming directly to all these services, we would literally have 2 completely separate development stacks. And so we chose very much just to focus 100% on the back end stuff running in AWS. Not to say that we don't support Azure or these other guys, but we don't put our infrastructure there. So there are companies that run their infrastructure in other providers. And if you really feel strongly that your infrastructure can't run in Amazon, then we are definitely not the company for you. But all of that data is deduplicated and then sent and stored and encrypted in AWS. And you never have to manage any of the backend infrastructure to make all this happen. So that's the one thing that's universal across all of our offerings.
Excellent. All right. Let's see. Another question. This question interests me because I'm kind of in the same boat here. When it comes to backing up Microsoft 365, we kind of just dump everything in there and we assume it's just taken care of for the most part. How do we know what we need to back up? I mean, like, will this tool tell us, is there a checkbox like backup Teams, backup OneDrive, backup Exchange, or do we have to be a lot more technically savvy than that, like backup this database X. How does
Yeah,
that work?
no, it's super simple, right? Again, you do a basic authentication to the appropriate authentication level, and then you simply, it's just a checkbox, right? Or do you want to back up, Microsoft Online or Exchange Online? Do you want to back up OneDrive? Do you want to back up SharePoint? Do you want to back up Teams? These are that's sort of the x-axis, and then the y-axis would be which users. Do you want to do all users, or do you want to do select users? That's it, right? And then you specify like how often you want to do it, that sort of thing. It's super simple.
I like that. All right. I need to try this myself. Another question, what about alerting via email and things like that, and basically knowing what's going on, what's available?
Yeah, of course. Yes, we have plenty of email alerts. There is a centralized management portal that you might have seen a screenshot or two from in the PowerPoint. But there is definitely email reporting at various levels to send various levels of alerts to the appropriate people. And
Nice.
and by the way, we also tie into other services, to do other things like that, right? To generate tickets and things like that if something's going wrong.
Okay. What about the backup frequency? Do you have control over that, and does that change the pricing model?
Yes, you have control over it, and no, it does not change the pricing model. I don't remember just how far down we go. It's pretty tight, the backup frequency with Microsoft 365. We're limited somewhat with their API limitations, but it's pretty darn frequent. I'm embarrassed that I forgot the answer to this question, but it's down in like something in an hour or less. It is how you can do it less often than that or more often than that. But it is
Very nice.
100% up
Yeah.
to you, and no, it does not affect the price.
That's a big benefit right there. What about backing up Teams private channels? Is that possible?
Somebody must be reading that KPMG article. So that was the in the case of Teams, there are the group chats, right? And then you have either a sort of a public group or private group, and then you have the private conversations. We do the private channels, which are the it's a private group chat, right? I just want to make sure I differentiate here. So there's the public and the private channels, which are the group level chat things. Yes, we do that. I'm going to come back to the restore part in a minute. What we are about to support next month is we are also going to support backing up the private chat, which is something I don't know any other companies that are actually currently doing. In fact, it's universally understood that it's not possible. We figured out a way to get that data. Microsoft is not particularly helpful with some of these things. They don't provide an API to get some of this data. We figured out a way to get that private chat data, and we'll be supporting that next month. Now let me go back to private channels. So we do back it up. Unfortunately, Microsoft does not provide an API to restore that data. And even in the public channels, we can restore files and wikis. We can't restore the conversation part of it, because again, Microsoft has some security models that an admin can't restore another user's chat. And so we can make the data available to you in a variety of formats, but we can't put it exactly back where it came from, and neither can anyone else, because the APIs don't exist. So if there's a vendor that's telling you that they can restore those channels, then specifically the conversations in those channels, I would call BS and make them demonstrate it for you, because there are no APIs to put that back. Sadly.
Very, very interesting. Another question, what about using OneDrive as your backup for Microsoft 365 data? Is that possible and or recommended?
Well, I don't see that. What I do see is I see people using OneDrive, inadvisably using OneDrive as a backup for their laptops. So the idea is, I don't want to back up my company's laptops. And so what we're going to do is, well, we're a Microsoft 365 customer. Everybody has OneDrive. So we just tell people that any files that matter, just put them in the OneDrive folder, and then it will be synchronized to Microsoft. I could talk for probably an entire hour about why I think this is a bad idea, but let me try to distill it down to a few points. One is that the biggest one here is that there is no centralized management and reporting of that activity. So if you are an administrator responsible for your company's data protection, and the way you plan to do that is to use OneDrive, synchronizing your data from your laptop, there is nothing built into the Microsoft 365 to let you know that that's happening. Absolutely nothing. All notification as to whether or not synchronization is happening is sent to the user via that little icon up in their upper or lower right-hand corner. And this is to users that have a variety of technical, knowledge or capabilities, right? So the only place that is going to know whether or not backups are working are the same people that you're trying to protect your data from. I mean, no disrespect to them, but so that's a big thing, is that it's not synchronized. The other is, that it's not reported on and managed. The other is that the same problem of like retention and how those files get retained and all that stuff. So if you get ransomware, what it does is it pushes the ransomware into OneDrive. Like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to protect your data in a way that would it would cause the ransomware attack to actually be more effective and to go into your OneDrive account? Now you have an infected OneDrive account. And yes, maybe the Microsoft 365 protection might notice it and might stop it. We know for a fact that it doesn't always stop it because we've had to restore users' data. But the big thing is it's just not designed to do that, right? You talk about the simplicity of how to add a laptop or how to add a user in our usual tool. That just isn't there for this, right? But the other, just the big thing is that it's not centrally managed and reported. And so when you find out, and by the way, that it means that a user can uninstall it. A user can unconfigure it. They can unconfigure it because, one day they were doing some stuff and their backups got really, their system got really slow, and they pull up, they're somewhat technical savvy. They looked at the task manager and they saw that this synchronization process was taking up all their CPU, and so they killed it and they unconfigured it. They can do that, and there's nothing that you will know that happens. And then or something bad can happen to it, and again, it will stop working, and you will not know. And the only person that may know is the person at the end, and they might not want to tell you. The reason that it might be deactivated is that they want to do something that won't be noticed. And then the whole other thing is that it's only going to protect what's in the OneDrive folder anyway. I think data gets put all over the place, not just in that folder. Anyway,
Yeah,
so, like I said, I can go ahead.
All excellent points there. It reminds me, when I was an IT manager, we did try for a while unsuccessfully to tell all the end users to protect their data, just put it on the network share, right? Mm-hmm. Well, of course,
that's the old answer. Yeah.
They didn't do it. Of course, they put their critical data on USB drives or on their desktop, or, so in the end, it wasn't protected. And also, like you mentioned there, it wasn't auditable, right? The auditors came in there, they want to make sure the data is protected, and you don't have any proof to show that, yeah, this data is really protected, just by recommending the users do something. So Great points all around. I think that's a good topic. We could do, like you said, a whole nother hour on that. But we are running out of time here. There's a lot of good questions coming in. I'm afraid we'll have to get back to a lot of these after the event, because I do want to, of course, remind everyone before we go to access the druva.com/live demo, weekly live demos where you can see Druva in action. You can also try out Druva in the AWS marketplace as well. And I'll leave those URLs up there on the screen while I announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. That's going to Alex.
Is it me?
Sorry, Curtis. Sorry to disappoint.
I said, is it me? It's no. Oh, dang it.
No, not today. Next time. Best of luck next time, Curtis. The winner for today is Alex Hager from Ohio. Congratulations. Alex Hager or Hager from Ohio. We'll reach out to you to deliver that gift card. I want to also remind everyone, don't forget about the Druva DXP Summit coming up. It's at dxp.druva.com. I put both of those URLs for the live demo and the Cloud Summit there in the questions box. Congratulations to Alex out there. He's posting in the questions box. Thank you for the gift card. Of course, thank you to Druva for supporting today's webinar. And as always, thank you to Curtis. Excellent presentation again, Curtis.
Happy to be here.
Thanks to everyone out there in today's audience. We appreciate your participation. Hope that you learned a lot, and we will see you next time. Have a great day.